So my name is Lara Anderson. I'm a professor of physics and mathematics at Virginia Tech. My research is in high energy particle physics and string theory. And I'm also a proud USU alum. I did my undergraduate degrees in physics and math at USU, as well as a master's degree in physics. My interest in research was sparked actually in the summer of my freshman year, so between my freshman and sophomore years at USU. And I was very lucky to approach different professors about research, have different opportunities, and get started right away on working on things. And for me, that potential to do research really anchored everything I was learning as a physics student. It made it more real in that, you know, you're seeing that there's actually a process of discovering new things that you can follow, not just to learn the established stuff, but also to come up with new things. Short version was, in the bad internet of the day, I was just Googling, you know, stuff to apply for, every conceivable fellowship, scholarship, anything that was related to the things I was interested in, science or eligible for undergrad. So I was attempting to carpet bomb every possible place I could apply. And that was what led me to the Goldwater and then eventually to the Rhodes Scholarship. I have to say that actually professionally, I found that still a good tactic, even later when I was applying for jobs and, you know, funding as a grown-up researcher, the apply for absolutely everything I have found to be a good tactic. You certainly won't get the stuff you don't apply for. The Rhodes Scholarship has been on scholarship for roughly 120 years. It's a graduate fellowship to go to Oxford University. I was attracted even as an undergrad I had never been to Oxford, but the idea of, you know, a university that's been a university for 1,000 years, that seems pretty magical. I thought this would be a great place to go to graduate school. And I was also charmed by the mission of the Rhodes Scholarship, that, you know, you're trying to invest in people who will hopefully make the world a better place. This statement that they're looking for people who want to fight the world's fight, I thought was appealing. I thought that was exciting, and I wanted to try. And the chance to do graduate school with really world-class researchers in a different part of the world, have an adventure, sounded great to me. The process of putting together all these applications, something I found as a student, that process is that it took me way longer than I thought it was going to. And I was very hesitant, even at the time, about, is this actually worth the trip, right? This is going to be this big, hairy thing that I've got to think through and put together and ask all these people for letters of recommendation. And I was wondering, you know, is it worth it? I think on the Rhodes, I heard somewhere, you know, something I read online that said that, you know, you should expect to put in something like 100 hours in your application. And I thought that was ridiculous. I was like, no way am I going to put in 100 hours on this application. And although I wasn't timing it, it was a really long time. It took a lot of time to get together. The thing, though, that I found even at the time was that process for any of these things of sort of thinking through where you're at clearly, you know, what do you care about? What are you excited by? Where do you want to go? What do you have to offer at the moment? Where would you like to build? This process of imagining a future for yourself and trying to articulate what the important pieces of it might be, what you would see, you know, how you see yourself making an impact. I think that's an incredibly valuable thought process. It was certainly very meaningful to me, irrespective of whether I got the money or not, although of course the money was, you know, important and helpful in all of this. You know, getting the award was sort of not the most transformative part of the process for me. I think definitely that thought process ahead of time proved to be super valuable. And for students that I've mentored on the other side of things, I've seen that from a number of other people as well, as I'm sure you have too. It's very easy, again, when you're just kind of getting stuck in and, you know, doing the work for the first time, to not understand in the beginning where all this that you're doing fits in this big constellation of ideas. So that's something as a student that this is a really good moment to take a step back, you know, talk to your professor, talk to other, you know, people in your lab and say, what are the exciting things? Why are people doing this? Why are they asking about this? What will happen if we get it to work? Like, where is all this fit? You know, why, again, who cares? Why are we doing this? And the ability to articulate the point, who cares? Why are we doing it? What will we get out of it? That's so valuable at every level of science. So I would say for some of my students, I feel like sometimes they're thinking, you know, when I tell them they have to write these things for a grant application, they're sort of looking at me like, this is a waste of my time to try and say this in layman's terms, but it really isn't, because if you can't say that, there really isn't much point in doing it. At the end, you want to be able to communicate your work to somebody. You want the result to matter for something. So I think it's hard. That isn't how you do it, but it's certainly a worthwhile process to continue working on at all stages of your career. The timing is a little strange. So for me, the year that I would have been like applying for grad schools in earnest around Christmas, I applied for the Rhodes, and the interviews were just before Thanksgiving. So I was actually offered that scholarship before I heard back from any, or had even finished applying to most of the places I'd planned to apply to grad school. So it was take it or leave it. The two scholarships, the Marshall and the Rhodes, I mean, Marshall is very similar, except it works for any UK university. These have sort of a different vibe for both of them in terms of the Marshall at least names alternates when they make an offer to you. The Rhodes, it's a question of deciding it on the spot. So you interview, they take everybody in a room and they say, okay, you got the scholarship. And it's yes or no right in that moment. So you don't get to, and if you say no, nobody else gets it. It's not, there's no backup plan. So that process of, you're on the spot, you've got this opportunity. There wasn't a lot of time to deliberate on that, but it was something that, it was a great university, and I thought, okay, I'm in, this sounds good. So I can speak to both communities a little, since I knew the Marshall community in Oxford at least quite well, but my main knowledge on this is through the Rhodes community. So the first thing I'll say about that is, before I went to Oxford, a number of people said to me about the Rhodes and the process of going to Oxford, it isn't about your degree, it's about the people you're going to meet, they said. And at the time, that made no sense to me, because I was like, I'm going to get a PhD. Surely it's about the degree. Surely. And of course it is, really it is about the degree. But I did not know at that time what that sense of community was going to be like. And it's a huge thing, really amazing. So Oxford is a university that's drawing people from all over the world. There's still the college style of education and of living, which is very much like the houses in Harry Potter, for those that have read that. So, you live in a space where your roommates are studying every possible discipline. They're not divided by department. The college that I was in had a ton of Australian lawyers at the time that I was there. And so overnight at dinner, I would sit with a group of Australian lawyers, and they would tell me fascinating things about Australian law that I never, would have been exposed to in any circumstance in my life other than that one. Certainly that was just, the university environment was this very interdisciplinary, getting to intersect with all these different people and ideas. For the Rhodes community, it is an incredibly varied, both in terms of, region, background, life experience, life view, group of people who are studying a huge range of things. And again, getting to see people who are very driven, who are very excited about such a range of topics was very, very important to me. I was really stunned by how much my boundaries shifted at that point, how much I could see different aspects of the world. I think getting to know potential mentors of every kind is so useful. And to me, I learned a huge amount about physics, about the way to think about things, to ask questions from my professors. And this process of actually, turning up in people's offices and making a pain of yourself and asking questions over and over again. The fact that everybody was patient with me, I'm super grateful for. But that made a huge difference in every, not just applying for fellowships, but for me deciding to go to graduate school, being successful in all of that. So I think I would not remotely have done the kinds of things I had done professionally if I didn't have people like Dr. Peak and the other professors in the physics department who were really cheering me on. And that feeling of having that support of, knowing that you had recourse to ask people questions. Definitely on all these fellowship applications, I showed lots of drafts of things and ideas and, went and got feedback, and people, steered me in much better directions with that feedback. Now on the other side of things, I'm trying to do the same thing. As a very general and sort of gross rule, I've seen that a lot of students are scared of bugging professors or being, taking up people's time. I have to say, particularly women tend to be a little bit more hesitant to try and seek out mentors. And I think, speaking for myself, at least as a professor, I'm always glad when students want to ask me stuff like this. So I think, be brave, give it a try. It's definitely worth the trip. I'm relatively fortunate in that, my generation of scientists had female scientists had a much easier time of it than, my mother's generation of people. There's real horror stories of women who really had to fight. So in that sense, I had it much easier. But even in my experience of physics, something that I've struggled with and I've had to try and think hard to articulate to some of my male colleagues is that I didn't have any role models for what my career might look like. So I never had a female professor in any of my physics courses from undergraduate through graduate school. Never did. I had no female mentors as after my PhD as a young researcher. In my department, I am the first woman to have had a child as a professor in my department. So, while having a baby while on the tenure clock. So these kinds of things of like, what does that look like as a woman? Like, what do you want your career to look like? Where do you want to go? How are you going to try and bring family and, a partner through all of that? Those were big questions to me at a lot of stages of my career that I didn't feel like there were easy answers to. And I feel like a lot of my friends who were guys in the same position just took for granted that things were going to work a certain way. Something that I do encourage students to do before they apply is, if you have looked at what you want to do, and, if there's a good program in Oxford or another UK university that makes sense for all of this, more power to you. It's a wonderful place to study, definitely apply. But for some people, it actually doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to go. I mean, there are some subjects where, I'm gonna just throw it out there, like, if you're like an amazing jazz musician and like you want to do jazz music is like your grand passion in life, graduate school in Oxford probably doesn't make a lot of sense. Or students that are absolutely bent on medical school, first thing, no, not that you couldn't do something at Oxford and then medical first, like there's some things where it isn't necessarily the best choice for what you want to do. And I would say it's not worth applying to just as a prize. Make sure that it really does make sense for what you want to do next. And it's quite broad. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities, but if it does make sense, then great.